Hello everyone. Today's lecture is on Taslima Nasrin's poem At the Back of the Progress. So let's begin with the introduction to the poetess. Taslima Nasrin, who is born on August 25, 1962, Memon Singh, East Pakistan, which is now known as Bangladesh. Bangladeshi feminist author who was forced out of her country because of her controversial writings, which many Muslims felt discredited Islam. Her plight was often compared to that of Sir Salman Rushdie, author of the Satanic Verses. This is Taslima Nasrin. Let me show you her picture. Right. Okay, so Taslima was a daughter of a doctor. She also became a doctor working in a family planning clinic in Memon Singh until she was reassigned to a government clinic in Dhaka in 1990. She left the National Medical Service in 1933. An author of magazine columns, poems, and fictions, Nasrin began publishing her writings in 1970s. She wrote withering diatribes against the oppression of women and the Islamic code that she felt made them virtually the chattel of the men. Her subject matter became increasingly sexual, and her condemnation of men was unrelenting. Her subject matter became increasingly sexual, and her condemnation of men was unrelenting. Contrary to Muslim practice, she wore her hair short and smoked cigarettes, and she eschewed traditional Muslim dress. Her writing and behavior enraged and offended strict Muslims, and in 1992, groups of those who objected to her work attacked bookstores in Dhaka that had made her books available. In 1993, Nasrin became an international cause celebre when a fatwa, that is a formal legal opinion, was issued against her in a reaction to her novel Lajja, published in 1993 and translated as Shame, which depicts the persecution of a Hindu family by Muslims. She further angered conservatives in May 1994 she further angered conservatives in May 1994 when she was quoted in the Calcutta Statesman as saying that the Quran should be revised thoroughly. This brought larger and more vociferous demonstrations, and including the demand that Nasrin be put to death. A bounty was offered to anyone who would kill her. She insisted that her statement referred to the Sharia, the Islamic code of law, rather than the Quran itself. The outcry against her went unabated, however, and the government called her for arrest, invoking a 19th century blasphemy law. After about 2 months in hiding, Nasrin appeared in court. She was released on bail and allowed to keep her passport. A few days later, she left the country to find sanctuary in Sweden. There, she remained in hiding while stating that when it was safe, she would return to Bangladesh to continue her battle for women's rights. Nasrin remained in exile after 1994. From Europe, she moved to India in 2004, but her presence was sharply criticized by Islamists there. In 2007, the city of Kolkata, as the Calcutta was known after 2001, erupted into riots as Islamists demanded that she be forced to leave the country. Nasrin then fled to the United States. Throughout these upheavals, she continued to publish, producing an autobiography in several volumes, Amar Mebela, 1999, My Girlhood, also published as My Bengali Girlhood. Utal Hawa 2002, which means Wild Wind, and Dvikhandito 2003, Divided, as well as novels and poetry. Okay, now let us move to the poem At the Back of Progress. Okay, At the Back of the Progress, as the title is indicative of the double standards of the society, that what happens at the back happens at the back of the progress. Uh, Um, the poem objectifies the condition of women in a patriarchal society which victimizes her. The poet exposes the hidden face of development and the points and she points out the attitude of men and their dubious standards or on morality. So the double standards of the morality are exposed in the poem. Her contention is that men's treatment of women is the same in every patriarchal society. It can belong to any class. The power structure is controlled by the hegemony, which allows her to live only at their mercy. So in this poem, she gives a few examples. In the beginning, she gives example of a high-ranking person who sits in an air-conditioned office. Then she moves um to an employee who is a very sophisticated and civilized kind of person, and then she talks about a bureaucrat and she talks about a man who is a fourth class person who keeps a lighter in his pocket and get tips. But ultimately the treatment towards women of all these kind of men is similar. Okay, so let's begin the poem. She says the fellow who sits in the air conditioned office is the one who in his youth raped a dozen or so young girls and at cocktail parties is strictly stricken with lust, fastening his eyes on Lovely's belly buttons. Okay, so the first stanza or the beginning stanza, it begins with the business class. A fellow who sits in the air conditioned office is actually the one who has raped many girls, even more than a dozen. She doesn't give any particular number and an exact number, but she says it can be a dozen or more girls, and at cocktail parties is secretly stricken with lust. Okay, he has to show himself at the parties as a very civilized person who is not interested in all these lusty things and lechery things. But ultimately, who is he? Someone who is secretly having a desire or lust in his heart, fastening his eyes on Lovely's belly buttons, and fixed his eyes on the lovely lady's belly button, the navel. In five-star hotels, he tries out his different sexual tastes with a variety of women, then returns home and beats his wife because of an over-ironed handkerchief or shirt collar. In five-star hotels, he tries out his different sexual taste. Okay, he goes to new women every day and he tries all the taste of sexuality, whatever he is interested in, with a variety of women, and then returns home and beats his wife. So he had enjoyed his life at full by going into the parties, going into the five-star hotels, by raping young girls, and when he returns home, he beats his wife. That is the actual face of his morality or his modernity or his so-called sophisticated attitude in the parties or in five-star hotels, that he beats his wife over an ironed handkerchief or a shirt collar. Means they are very trivial things, very small things, insignificant. Okay, now she moves to the next category, the bureaucrats. In his office, Mr. Big puffs on a cigarette, shuffles through files, rings for his employee, shouts, demands tea, drinks, and returns to writing people's character references. In the office, the bureaucrat or the officers of administrative class, they puff on the cigarette, keep smoking the cigarette, shuffle, keep moving between the files, and ring for employees, call for their employees, demands for tree, drinks the tree, and return to writing people's character references and begin writing, giving a character certificate to various people. His employee speaks in such a low voice that no one would ever suspect how at home he also raises his voice. Okay, the employee who is the subordinate, okay, speaks in such a low voice that no one can suspect and no one can even think that how at home he this man can also raise his voice, is wild to family, is dangerous to the family, but with his buddies on the porch or at a movie indulges in loud harangues on politics, but with the friends or in the movies or in social gatherings, he gives loud harangues, loud speeches over politics, art, literature, and how some female, his mother, grandmother, great grandmother, committed suicide. So he gives lecture that how ladies commit suicide because of the things, wrong things happen to them, and how he speaks over politics, literature, art, and so many things. But ultimately, what is he? Let's see in the next stanza. Bidding goodbye to his buddies, he returns home, beats his wife over a bar of soap, or the baby is pneumonia. But this man, this subordinate, this employee, also who seems very timid and very sophisticated and very cultured, very civilized, very well behaved when he talks about art, literature, and the role of female in the society, he also, when he returns to home, beats his wife over a bar of soap and over the baby's pneumonia. Okay. So next day at work, he pleasantly brings the tea. Now the next category, the fourth class. At work, he pleasantly brings the tea, keeps the lighter in his pocket, receives a tip of a couple of taka. Okay, taka is the Bangladeshi currency. So next day at work, he pleasantly brings the tea. He is happy when he brings the tea, keeps the lighter in the pocket so that he can receive tips from the masters, and tells no one that he divorced his first wife for her sterility, his second for giving birth to a daughter, his third for not bringing sufficient dowry, and now with wife number 4 he again has someone to beat over a green chili or a handful of rice. So next, this man who seems very pleasant, a very happy go lucky, very merry kind of a person at his office, how he is also one who has divorced his wife. He is even more dangerous than the earlier classes because he has divorced his wife for the sterility because she could not produce any child, and his second wife for giving birth to a daughter, and third for not bringing sufficient dowry, and now he has another wife, the wife number 4, and he has someone to whom he can beat over a green chili or a handful of rice. Means very small things which can be neglected, which can be ignored sometimes. So this is what happens at the back of progress. Although we are moving forward, although the world is moving forward, but how timid women are, how women are still suffering. So whether you go to any section of society, men's treatment of women is same. So the title itself is very sarcastic, and the poem is again an irony or a satire or a sarcasm over the dual standards of society. Thank you very much. You can ask your doubts in the comment box. Thank you. See you again.